Story number 1. Car Chase. The summer after I graduated from high school, my boyfriend was driving me to his home for the first time. He lived a town over from me. I left work early, and we went up to his parents' house in northern Michigan. It was my first time meeting them, and I was really looking forward to it. As we were driving, it got quite late into the night, and we saw a man lying on the ground in the strangest position, kneeling with his head on the ground and bent at a sharp angle so that he faced the street. It was around midnight at this point. We pulled over and my boyfriend hopped out of the car to go check on the guy when something stopped him and he jumped back into the car. He said he just didn't feel safe. Instead, he rolled the car window down and called out to him, but the man didn't respond. We debated it a bit, but ultimately thought it was a bad idea to get out of the car in the middle of the night. This was before cell phones, so we went around him with the intention of going to the nearest house to call 911. About 10 minutes later, there was an older Tahoe that started riding behind us and flashing its high beams. So we got up to about 60 in a 45. They didn't let up. We pulled off to the side road that his parents' house is off of, and they took the same turn. We thought this seemed weird because there's only about 30 or 40 houses on the road. So we went all the way to the end, which is usually a dead end, but at that point in time led to a maintenance area. The car was still following us. At this point, I was freaking out because if we pulled into the house, they'd know where we lived, and they were still at our heels. My boyfriend was trying to stay calm, but I could tell he was freaking out too. He kept looking out the window and swearing, getting more and more agitated. He began to take a ton of random turns, and they kept following every single turn for about 15 minutes. We finally had a chance to make a turn with traffic going through the intersection that gave us a few seconds of a head start. We pulled down a side street, turned off all our lights, and waited. We didn't speak. We were both waiting with bated breath. We probably waited about 20 minutes, but it felt like much longer. But we couldn't take it anymore. After that, we floored it to his parents' house and called 911 the second we got there. His parents could barely understand us. They'd expected us about an hour earlier, and we were belligerent by that stage. Unfortunately, the police were never able to find anything. One thing my boyfriend had noticed, but hadn't wanted to mention in the car because he didn't want to scare me further, was that the license plate of the other car had been taped over. Story number 2. Mindfulness driving. I've always loved to drive. It's how I found my happy place. Hours-long drives to nowhere with no destination in mind. Just me, my music, and the road ahead of me. Living in the rural USA, I'd often take back roads or lonely highways, cutting through the countryside to small towns and eventually cities. And I'd usually go on these drives at night since there was less traffic to worry about. For years, I'd never had any kind of trouble. That was until a few months ago. I've done these long and lonely drives because I was in a very difficult place mentally and emotionally at the time, and these were the only things I felt truly helped. That night, I drove around our city for about 30 minutes, but I was still feeling on edge about everything transpiring in my personal life, so I decided to drive further north down those familiar, dark, winding, one-lane highways. I kept the car at a steady 65 miles per hour. It was being all alone with no cars in sight, in seemingly the middle of nowhere. The few houses miles back from the road was lightless, and it was nothing but dead cornfields surrounding me. It was also silent as a grave. I got a strange, creepy feeling. I didn't know what it was. Something just felt off. I felt like I was in a Stephen King novel, in a way I had never felt on these drives before. I thought that maybe it was everything that was going on in my personal life that made me feel so uneasy. At this point, it was just after 11, and I told myself that once I made the familiar roundabout that would either take you to a small town or back up towards the city, I would head back home to the city. That roundabout was still about a half hour away. As I'm rounding another turn, I notice a vehicle with its hazards flashing maybe a quarter of a mile or something away from me. It was some sort of sedan, and oddly, The driver's side door was flung wide open. I couldn't catch sight of anyone in the car. The car was inching towards me until it was right beside me, so I slowed my vehicle, turned down my music, rolled down my passenger window, and called out to them, asking if they were okay. No one responded at first, and my uneasiness grew. The car started slowing down, and it stopped. Out of a mixture of both compassion and stupidity, I stopped too. I still waited in my car though. All of a sudden, I hear a loud bang, bang from the driver's side window. I screamed and looked over. A man was pounding on my window and jiggling the handle of my locked car. I looked in the rear view mirror. I caught a glance of someone coming out from behind the car, and they were running towards my car. They were wearing masks, a bit like the ones you see in the Purge movies, and they were holding something in their hand. I slammed on the gas and drove like hell, my heart thundering in my chest and my entire body shaking. My window was still rolled down, so I could very clearly hear someone, definitely a man, shouting at me, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I can't imagine anything good. I took one last look in my rearview mirror as I drove away, mostly to see if they were getting in their car to chase me. The man with the weapon was still standing in the middle of the road, watching me, and right before I looked away from the mirror, I saw a third man emerge from the trees, also wearing one of those creepy masks. As soon as I made it to my town, I parked in the Walmart parking lot and started crying. When I calmed down a bit, I called one of my friends. She was scared for me and begged me to report it to the police. I did, and even gave them the location of where it happened. They said they investigated but never found anything. However, they told me that later that same night, another woman reported a similar incident. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe right away. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notifications of more creepy stories.